Hello, I'm Linda Ann Smith at Studio ABC. I'm a video creator for Paverpol at paverpolusa.com. Join me in my studio to see how I make three-dimensional art with this amazing product. I popped a board inside of a plastic bag to make a nice surface to work on because Paverpol doesn't stick to plastic, and I taped it down. And then I've got plastic over my table to protect it. This is a sheet of parchment paper, and parchment paper is usually good to work on, so I'm kind of experimenting to see what works best for me today. On this Hobby Lobby bag that I put over the board, I'm going to use it for laying out my fabric and brushing the Paverpol onto the fabric. I'm finding that for me, that works, it seems to work the best. So I showed you there, I taped all the bulk of the bag to the back and have a smooth surface to work on the front. I started out with this fabric and changed my mind, but when I put down fabric and brush on it, this is what I'll be doing. I'll be putting the fabric over the Hobby Lobby bag and then brushing the product onto the fabric. I thought this little mask might make a good form to use, kind of like an armature, but to build up over this form with Paverpol. But I want to use it more than once. So it is plastic, but I'm not sure if it'll stick to this and stick inside those eyes and that sort of thing. So I'm covering it with a cling wrap, and I'll tape it to the inside and push it down as much as I can. One of the things that I found with the cling wrap, though, is it didn't want to come up around the nose like I wanted it to. So I'll get it to form as much as I can, and then I'm just going to pull it around to the back and give it some tape on the back to hold this in place. I'll also make sure to cover the eye sockets with tape. I found these plastic serving trays in the back of my cabinets, and I think they're going to be really good to work on top of because I like to be able to move it around when I'm working on it. So I still have this fabric that I'm not going to use on top of it. But anyway, this is about the right size, and I'll stay approximately within the oval. I'm not going to make it exactly oval shaped, but I'll stay approximately within those areas to get my design. I'm going to cover this tray just like I covered the mask. You can work barehanded with Paverpol, but I've got my gloves on and I've got the tray ready and covered with plastic and foils, and it makes an easy surface to move around while I'm working. And I have some fabric scraps all cut. See how I use the brush here to put the Paverpol on, and then I turn it upside down and put Paverpol on the back too. And I'm just going to start covering my mask the best I can, pushing it down as much as I can. And it's not going to go completely down on each side of that nose. It's just not going to happen because the plastic's holding it up. But that's okay. I'll lose some of the features, but I'll get most of it. Now it's just a matter of laying one piece of fabric over the other, overlapping, pushing it up as much as I can against that mask, using my brush. The Paverpol is like a really thick, heavy glue, so it stays in place pretty well. But sometimes I like for it to, I'll do 2 or 3 pieces of fabric at one time so that they'll be a little bit tacky if I'm working in places that are tricky. Today I'm working with a fabric that we used to call whipped cream. It's a polyester fabric. It's a thin, fairly thin fabric, maybe medium weight might be a better description of it. And I'm working with the transparent Paverpol. That way the color of the fabric won't change. It'll stay the same. Because when this dries, I'll be able to see the fabric again. It's white now, but it dries clear. A little tip if you work with Paverpol around cameras or telephones or anything that, your computer, anything that you don't want to get a sticky mess on, then you should keep a plastic bag open beside you and you can poke your gloved hand or your bare hand into that, the messy hand. Poke the messy hand into it before you answer the phone or before you touch a button on your computer. And that works really well. That was a good tip to learn. Because while this is a wonderful sculptural product, it's not very pretty when it gets on your phone or your camera or your computer or any of your technology. So that just saves me the aggravation of trying to clean those things up later. I have a little piece sticking up here, and you can just glue that back down, no problem. I'll probably end up putting a couple of layers of fabric on this because this fabric, the polyester fabric doesn't work as well and get as hard as the like muslin, unbleached muslin. I really like working with it. But I like working with the polyester fabric because it is a soft fabric that I'm using, and it gives me really nice folds when I'm ready for those graceful folds around her face. It's going to work well. Where one piece of fabric goes over another one, I make sure that I press the seam down nice and tight, the edges of it. I don't want anything sticking up, but the face is going to have some texture in it when I finish. There may be a solution for making a really smooth face later on, and I may discover that, but right now I'm still in the process of learning about the product, and I'm just doing what seems to work. I was so ready as an artist to dive back into some three-dimensional projects. And I've been doing watercolors and acrylics for a number of years, and I do some mixed media projects which end up being three-dimensional. But some sculptural type projects like you can do with Paverpol is really the answer to keeping it economical. Bronze and some of those metals are very, very expensive to deal with. I've never dealt with stone in doing sculptural work, but this just seems to be a really good answer for me, and the more I work with it, the more I think of that I can do with it. This reminds me so much of when I was a little girl and my granny and I would make manger scenes using pieces of muslin and starch, liquid starch, but this is so much more durable. Now you see the piece that I've been brushing the Paverpol on, and I'm going to drape it around, kind of using the tray as a guideline, as I said I would. And I want some drapes and folds all the way around her face. So I'll manipulate these pieces into place, but when it gets right down to it, I'll let the folds occur naturally, because that's where you'll get your graceful movement in this work. But I'll keep working with it until I get it sealed to her face the way I want it, and then let the folds just occur. I'm keeping in mind a general idea of where I want to go with this, but I'm also seeing what the fabric wants to do and where it falls and how it looks, and I can always pick it back up and rearrange it if I don't like it. I'm almost to the point that I'm ready to take it outdoors and let it dry, and you'll see that this is where your tray or some surface, lightweight surface that you're working on will come in really handy, because all you have to do is pick it up and pop it out the door. I gave this mask extra drying time, some indoors and some outdoors, and because I needed to pop it off the mask and let the inside of it dry, because it was up against that surface, so it didn't dry very well. So I popped it off, let the inside dry a little, and I'm ready to go to work on it again. The longer it dries, the more stiff and resistant it becomes. As the moisture disappears, this really hardens up. You'll think at first, oh, it's not going to work. And then a couple of days later, you realize that it's hardened. One of the things I learned is that if you get too much Paverpol on it, it's going to leave shiny areas. And I didn't necessarily want the shiny areas, but I'm going to paint it anyway, so it's not going to hurt anything. I have some ultra metallic paints. It's a brand new product, and it's called Vivid. And I'm going to use those on this goddess to make her come to life. I'll begin with the color African Jade because it comes closest to the color of fabric that I have, but it's, like I said, it is highly metallic, so it's really going to bring out some of the features and the folds, and I probably will end up going over most of the face with it. At this point, I'm not sure how much I want on the face. I do think that I'm going to make the folds the most important part around her face instead of the face itself. So I've got a little plastic or styrofoam bowl here, and I just put out a little bit at a time because I'm going to put just a little bit of on my brush, and sort of like dry brushing, not exactly like dry brushing, but very thin coats until I work it up to the point that I like it. If I had wanted realistic colors on this, Paverpol does have some skin tones in their colors, and you could take fabric and dip it into those skin tones and it would end up being flesh tone, but that's not the look that I was going after with this. So I'm just building up one small layer at a time until I see how much I want on here. I ended up with a pretty nice heavy coat, and I thought I was going to leave the eyes out, but they looked a little spooky, so I'm adding the eyes back in with paint. And now I'm just going to brush some of the highlights with this same color, because building up layers of these metallic colors really look pretty. The next color I'll be using is from the Vivid line is Pink Azalea. And since I'm going to keep the face really simple, then all the colors that I put on the face are going to be very vague. In fact, I've started this with a little bit too much color. I'll be wiping some of this off. Just making some little lips here. I want you to be able to tell that it's a lady. I want you to see my goddess, but I don't want it to be stark. I want it to be very subtle. And I'll put a little rouge on her cheeks, little color here and there. I'm dipping back into that lip area for color because I don't want it to be that bright. And I can actually, when that dries a little bit, I can go over it with some of that African Jade and tone it down a little bit because I've got too much on there. I don't want anything striking on the face. But just a little bit of that tint around on the face gives it a nice little glow. The next color I'll be using is Lemongrass. And again, I'm just going to hit the highlights of folds because I'm working up these layers of colors. Now I'll switch paint colors to True Silver. And this is one of my favorites in this line. It just looks like sterling silver, high polished sterling silver when you put it on anything. It also makes a really nice background for other colors because they really show up on top of this particular color. Another layer to hit some of the highlights that I haven't done yet. I keep calling them highlights. It's the high places in the folds. And I keep going back and forth between the colors, and the only one I'm avoiding is that Pink Azalea in there because I want that only on her face. The next color in the Vivid line I'll use is Ginger Peach. I talked earlier about wanting to try out a smoother face sometime, but I'm really liking the textures that the Paverpol created in this because it makes it look a little more old and ancient, and I think that's fitting for this little pretend goddess. With every project I make, I'm falling more and more in love with the Paverpol. My walls are going to be full of three-dimensional projects. Now I'm going over those lips a little bit with the African Jade again to kind of mute that out. That color was just way too bright for me. I see a few little tags here and there that I'm going to even up with my scissors. And this around the edges where it's just one layer, it's kind of leather hard, so I'm able to cut that with scissors. I'm going to pull in a permanent black artist's pen and indicate some eyelashes like a sleeping lady here. Her eyes are closed, but I need a few little eyelashes. This is nice because the pen isn't showing up like a stark black. It's just kind of a soft gray. Even when I go over and over it, kind of ends up being a soft gray. And I think I'm going to hit that with some wet paint and soften it even more. So far I've been hitting mostly the high spots with the paint, but I think now I want to find another color, maybe a violet type color, to go in the areas that are recessed, and so that should really pop things. And since violet colors are always good in the shadows, I'm using Snapdragon. And this is just the touch it needed because I'm getting exactly the look that I had hoped for. I'm intending this as a wall hanging, but imagine the mask that you could make for masquerade balls or for your children's Halloween costumes. This is an amazing product, really beautiful. Here she is all finished. I'll probably add later when she dries, I'll add a varnish to her. So if you want to make some three-dimensional projects, I highly recommend that you use Paverpol. As with any new media that I use, I felt just a little bit clumsy with it at first, but boy, it didn't take long for me to get to know this product. Check the description box below for all the products that I used, and be sure to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Share on your social media, make a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.